The crimson moons of Valdris cast an eerie glow across the twisted landscape as Dr. Nora Blackwood crouched beside what should have been certain death. Her hands trembled slightly as she examined the wounded creature before her, its obsidian, scales gleaming even through the coating of purple blood and dirt. The young Cytherian's breathing was shallow, each exhale producing a low rumble that sent shivers down her spine. "Nora, step away from that thing right now," Captain James Rodriguez hissed through the comm, his rifle trained on the injured predator. "Do you have any idea what you're looking at?" She knew exactly what she was looking at. Every human in the galaxy knew about the Cytherians. They were living nightmares, apex predators that had earned their fearsome reputation by dismantling 3 different colonial expeditions with ruthless efficiency, standing nearly 8 feet tall when fully grown, with razor-sharp claws, armored hide, and intelligence that rivaled humanity's greatest minds. They were the stuff of legends and terror stories told around campfires on frontier worlds. But this wasn't a full-grown warrior. This was a cub barely the size of a large dog, and it was dying. "It's just a baby, James," Nora whispered, her medical scanner revealing internal injuries that would prove fatal without immediate intervention. "Look at it, really look. It can't be more than a few months old." The rest of her survey team maintained their defensive positions around the small clearing where they'd discovered the wounded creature. Sergeant Tommy Wu kept his eyes on the tree line, watching for any sign of adult Cytherians who might come searching for their young. Dr. Raj Patel nervously adjusted his equipment, ready to bolt at the first sign of danger. "The protocols are clear, Nora," James said, though his voice lacked its usual authority. "Cytherians are classified as an extreme threat. We're supposed to maintain distance and report any sightings to Colonial Command." The protocols were written by people who never saw one bleeding to death in front of them, Nora replied, carefully reaching for her medical kit. The cub's large amber eyes followed her movements, and she could see intelligence there, along with pain and something that looked remarkably like hope. The creature tried to lift its head as she approached, but the effort seemed to exhaust it. A soft whimper escaped its throat, a sound so heartbreakingly vulnerable that it shattered every preconception Nora had about these supposedly emotionless killing machines. "Don't do this," Tommy called out. "You know what happened to the Morrison expedition when they tried to make contact? 17 good people turned into decorations for Cytherian trophy walls." Nora paused, her hand hovering over the medical supplies. She knew the stories. Everyone did. The Morrison expedition had attempted first contact protocols and had been slaughtered to the last person. The Valdris colonists had tried to establish peaceful coexistence and had been driven off their own world. 3 separate military operations had ended in devastating losses. But looking at this small, wounded creature, she couldn't reconcile those stories with what lay before her. The cub's breathing was becoming more labored, and its eyes were starting to dim. In minutes, maybe less, it would be dead. "I can't just watch it die," she said finally, opening her medical kit and pulling out the universal healing foam. "I became a xenobiologist to study and preserve life, not to let it slip away because of fear." James lowered his rifle slightly. "If you do this, there's no going back. Once you touch that thing, we're committed to whatever comes next." "Then we better hope what comes next doesn't involve us becoming someone's dinner," Tommy muttered, but he didn't move to stop her. Nora activated the healing foam and carefully applied it to the worst of the cub's wounds. The creature tensed, at first a low growl building in its throat, but as the foam's numbing properties took effect, it relaxed. She worked quickly but gently, treating the deep gashes along its flanks and the severe bruising around its head. "What do you think happened to it?" Raj asked, his scientific curiosity overcoming his fear. "Looks like it fell," Nora replied, noting the pattern of injuries. "Probably from a significant height. Maybe it was learning to climb and took a tumble, or maybe it was fleeing from something even more dangerous than itself." The cub's eyes never left her face as she worked. There was something unsettling about that gaze, an intelligence that seemed far too advanced for such a young creature. When she finished with the healing foam and began wrapping the more serious wounds with synthetic bandages, the cub actually seemed to relax, trusting her completely. "I think it understands that we're helping," she said softly. "Or it's too weak." To try eating us yet? Tommy replied, though his tone had lost some of its edge. As Nora completed her emergency treatment, the cub struggled to lift its head again. This time, it managed to maintain the position, looking directly at her with those remarkable amber eyes. Then, to everyone's amazement, it made a sound that was unmistakably a purr. Did that thing just... James started. It's thanking her, Raj breathed. I've studied enough alien species to recognize gratitude when I hear it. The moment of wonder was shattered by the sound of heavy footsteps crashing through the undergrowth. The team immediately formed a defensive circle around Nora and the wounded cub, weapons raised and ready. The footsteps were too heavy to be human, too rhythmic to be random wildlife. Cytherians, adult ones. 3 massive figures emerged from the tree line, and Nora felt her heart stop. Even having studied them extensively, nothing had prepared her for seeing full-grown Cytherians in person. They were magnificent and terrifying, their obsidian scales gleaming like armor, their claws extending from powerful hands that could tear through steel. The largest of the 3, bearing intricate scarification across his chest that marked him as a high-ranking warrior, stepped forward. His amber eyes, so like the cub's but filled with barely contained fury, swept across the human team before settling on Nora and the wounded youngster. When he spoke, his voice was a deep rumble that seemed to vibrate through the ground itself. Step away from the hatchling, small flesh. The words were in perfect, accented English, which somehow made them even more chilling. Nora realized that not only were the Cytherians intelligent, but they had been studying humanity just as intently as humans had been studying them. We were helping, Nora said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. Your young one was injured. We provided medical treatment. The large warrior's eyes narrowed. Human medical treatment could poison a Cytherian. You may have doomed him with your interference, or saved his life, Nora replied firmly. The injuries were severe. Without treatment, he would have died within minutes. Behind the lead warrior, the other 2 Cytherians shifted restlessly, their claws extending and retracting in what was clearly an aggressive display. The tension in the clearing was thick enough to cut, and Nora could feel her team's fingers tightening on their triggers. Then the cub did something that changed everything. With great effort, the young Cytherian pulled itself to its feet and took 3 wobbling steps toward Nora. It pressed its small head against her leg and began to purr again, the sound even stronger than before. Then it looked up at the large warrior and made a series of chirping sounds that were clearly some form of communication. The warrior's expression shifted from rage to confusion to something that might have been wonder. He knelt down, bringing his massive head level with the cub, and engaged in what was obviously a conversation. The chirps and rumbles went back and forth for several minutes, while the humans watched in fascination. Finally, the warrior stood and looked directly at Nora. Zephyr says you showed him kindness when death was near. He says your touch brought healing, not harm. He paused, and something that might have been respect flickered in his amber eyes. I am Warlord Grimjaw of the Northern Clans. This hatchling is my son. The revelation hit the humans like a physical blow. They had just saved the child of what was essentially Cytherian royalty. The implications were staggering. I am Dr. Nora Blackwood, she replied, instinctively recognizing that this moment would define everything that came after. We meant no harm. We only wished to preserve life. Grimjaw studied her for a long moment, then looked at his son, who was still pressed against her leg as if seeking comfort. For 3 generations, my people have known only conflict with yours. Humans take our worlds, destroy our hunting grounds, kill our warriors. We respond with blood and conquest. It is the way of things. He paused, his gaze returning to Nora. But you risked yourself for a hatchling not of your species. You showed mercy where none was expected. This changes things. The other Cytherians looked as surprised as the humans. Clearly, this was not how first contact situations typically unfolded. Perhaps, Grimjaw continued slowly, it is time for both our peoples to consider a different path. As if summoned by his words, Zephyr chirped once more and took another step toward his father, then back to Nora, as if trying to bridge the gap between the two species. In that moment, with a wounded cub serving as an unlikely ambassador, the first fragile threads of understanding began to form between humanity and the galaxy's most feared predators. The rescue of one small life had opened a door that might lead to peace, or it might lead to something far more dangerous. But as Nora looked into Grimjaw's ancient eyes and saw the first glimmer of something other than hostility, she knew that whatever came next, the galaxy would never be the same. 3 weeks had passed since that fateful encounter in the Crimson-lit clearing, and the temporary camp established at the border between human and Catherian territories buzzed with an energy that no one had thought possible. What had begun as a desperate attempt to prevent interspecies war had evolved into something unprecedented in galactic history. Dr. Nora Blackwood sat cross-legged in the soft grass, watching as Zephyr playfully stalked a mechanical butterfly that Dr. Raj Patel had designed specifically for the young Catherian's entertainment. The cub had recovered completely from his injuries, growing stronger and more confident each day. His bond with Nora had deepened, but he had also formed surprising friendships with other members of the human team. "He's getting bigger," Captain James Rodriguez observed, settling down beside her. The wariness that had once defined his interactions with the Catherians had gradually given way to genuine fascination. "Catherians mature quickly," Nora replied, scratching behind Zephyr's ear ridges as he returned from his hunt. The mechanical butterfly clutched gently in his jaws. "Grimjaw says he'll be nearly adult-sized within a year." The negotiations between their species had been unlike anything in diplomatic history. Rather than sterile conference rooms and formal protocols, the talks took place in the open air, with both sides sharing meals, stories, and gradually, trust. Warlord Grimjaw had proven to be not only a formidable warrior, but also a thoughtful leader who genuinely wanted peace for his people. "Dr. Blackwood," Sergeant Tommy Wu called out as he approached, his expression grave. "You need to hear this. We just received a priority transmission from Colonial Command." Nora felt her stomach drop. She had been dreading this moment, knowing that word of their unauthorized first contact would eventually reach the higher authorities. She stood brushing off her clothes and followed Tommy to the communications array. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing the stern face of Admiral Harrison Cross, commander of the Outer Rim Defense Force. His expression was thunderous as he began speaking. "Dr. Blackwood, Captain Rodriguez, you are both to be placed under immediate arrest for violations of the alien contact protocols. Furthermore, you are to terminate all interactions with the hostile Catherian forces and withdraw to the nearest colonial base for debriefing." James stepped forward. "Admiral, with respect, the situation here is more complex than... The situation is that you've compromised military secrets to a species that has killed hundreds of our people," Cross interrupted. "Intelligence reports indicate massive Catherian fleet movements throughout this sector. Your little peace talks have given them the perfect cover to prepare for a full-scale assault." Nora felt the blood drain from her face. "That's not possible. Grimjaw has been nothing but honorable. The Catherians don't understand honor the way we do, Doctor. They understand strength and conquest. You've been played." The Admiral's image leaned forward. "You have 6 hours to pack up and leave. Any Catherians found in the area after that will be considered hostile targets." The transmission ended, leaving the humans in stunned silence. Behind them, the sound of heavy footsteps announced Grimjaw's arrival. The massive warrior had clearly overheard at least part of the conversation. "So," he rumbled, his amber eyes unreadable, "your leaders have decided that peace is not possible." "Grimjaw, please understand," Nora began, but he held up a clawed hand. "I understand perfectly, Dr. Blackwood. Your people see only what they expect to see, as do mine." He paused, his expression growing grim. "The fleet movements your admiral mentioned are real. My people have been gathering, but not for the reasons he believes." "Then why?" James asked, his hand instinctively moving toward his weapon, before he caught himself. Grimjaw's response was interrupted by a sound that made everyone freeze. From the depths of space came a low, thrumming vibration that seemed to penetrate bone and soul. The sky above them began to darken, as massive shapes blotted out the stars. "The Devourers," Grimjaw whispered, and for the first time since they'd known him, the mighty warrior sounded afraid. "They have found us." The ships descending from orbit were unlike anything in human or Cytherian experience. Organic in appearance, they resembled massive insects with chitinous hulls and multiple appendages that writhed with independent life. The largest of them was easily the size of a small moon, and the smaller vessels numbered in the thousands. "What are the Devourers?" Nora asked, though part of her already knew she didn't want to hear the answer. "They are the reason the Cytherian fleets have been gathering," Grimjaw replied, his warriors already taking defensive positions around the camp. "They consume entire worlds, leaving nothing behind but empty space. My scouts detected their approach 3 cycles ago." The horrible truth crashed over Nora like a wave. The Cytherians hadn't been preparing to attack humanity. They had been preparing to defend against something far worse. "Why didn't you tell us?" James demanded. "Would your people have believed us?" Grimjaw asked pointedly. "Would they have listened to warnings from their greatest enemies? Or would they have assumed it was a trick?" The first Devourer vessels had reached the planet's surface, and the sounds of battle could be heard in the distance. Explosions lit the horizon as Cytherian defensive positions came under attack. "We have to get off this planet," Tommy said urgently. "Our ship has already been destroyed," Grimjaw interrupted, pointing to a column of smoke rising from the direction of their landing site. "The Devourers target all technology first. They learn, adapt, consume." Zephyr pressed against Nora's leg, chittering anxiously as the sound of approaching Devourer scouts grew louder. The mechanical butterfly fell forgotten from his jaws as primitive fear overtook his playful nature. "Then we fight together," Nora said firmly, surprising everyone, including herself. Human and Cytherian side by side. Grimjaw stared at her for a long moment, then threw back his head and laughed, a sound like boulders grinding together. "You would stand with us against the galaxy's greatest threat?" "You would stand with us?" she replied. "Despite everything our species have done to each other, you're here ready to fight alongside us. That tells me everything I need to know about Cytherian honor." The next few hours became a blur of desperate preparation. The humans shared their advanced targeting systems and energy weapons with the Cytherians, while the warriors taught the humans their sophisticated close combat techniques and tactical strategies. Dr. Patel worked frantically to adapt human technology to Cytherian physiology, creating hybrid weapons that combined the best of both species' innovations. The battle, when it came, was unlike anything in recorded history. Devourer bioships crashed into hastily constructed barricades while human pulse rifles and Cytherian plasma claws carved through chitinous armor. Nora found herself fighting back-to-back with Grimjaw, her medical training proving surprisingly useful in identifying weak points in Devourer anatomy. "Behind you!" James shouted, his rifle spitting fire at a Devourer drone that had flanked their position. The creature's acid blood splashed across the ground, eating through metal and stone with equal ease. Zephyr, despite his youth, fought with the instinctive ferocity of his species. His smaller size allowed him to dart between the legs of larger Devourer forms, his claws finding gaps in their armor that the adults couldn't reach. The turning point came when Dr. Patel made a crucial discovery. The Devourer's coordination was maintained through bioelectromagnetic pulses transmitted between their ships. By combining human signal jamming technology with Cytherian biointerference techniques, they could disrupt the enemy's communication network. "If we can get close enough to the command ship," Patel explained breathlessly during a brief lull in the fighting, "we can upload the disruption virus directly into their network." "That's a suicide mission," Tommy pointed out. "Those ships are crawling with Devourers." "Not if we work together," Grimjaw said thoughtfully. Cytherian stealth techniques combined with human technological precision. A small team could penetrate their defenses. What followed was the most dangerous gambit in either species' history. Nora, Grimjaw, and Zephyr formed the core of the infiltration team, using a combination of Cytherian camouflage abilities and human cloaking technology to approach the massive command ship. The interior was a nightmare of organic corridors and pulsing biomachinery, but their combined knowledge allowed them to navigate the alien vessel. The upload process took precious minutes while Devourer security forces closed in around them. Grimjaw and Zephyr held the corridor while Nora and her portable computer interfaced with the alien network. The virus, when it finally took hold, spread through the Devourer fleet like wildfire. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Devourer ships began colliding with each other as their coordination failed. The smaller vessels, cut off from Central Command, became easy targets for the combined human-Catherian ground forces. As the enemy fleet retreated into space, leaving behind their dead and abandoning their invasion, Nora found herself sitting in the ruins of what had been their camp, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. "So what happens now?" she asked Grimjaw, who was tending to Zephyr's minor wounds from the battle. "Now we begin something new," the warrior replied. "My people have a saying. Those who shed blood together are bound by honor. Today, humans and Catherians have shed blood together in defense of life itself." James approached, carrying a communication device that had somehow survived the battle. "I've managed to contact Colonial Command. Admiral Cross wants to speak with you, Nora." When the holographic display activated, Admiral Cross looked markedly different from their last conversation. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something that might have been humility. "Dr. Blackwood," he began carefully, "our long-range sensors detected the Devourer fleet and recorded the battle. It appears we may have misunderstood the situation." "The Catherians saved our colony worlds," Nora replied simply. "Without their warning and their warriors, the Devourers would have consumed everything in this sector." "Yes, well," Cross cleared his throat. "Perhaps it's time for a more official diplomatic approach to human-Catherian relations. Would you be willing to serve as our first ambassador?" Nora looked at Grimjaw, who nodded gravely. Then she looked down at Zephyr, who had curled up against her leg and was purring contentedly despite his wounds. "I think that could be arranged," she said. Months later, the first joint human-Catherian research station orbited peacefully above Valdris. Dr. Nora Blackwood stood in the observation deck, watching as human and Catherian children played together in the station's recreation areas. Zephyr, now nearly full-grown, served as an unofficial ambassador between the species, his easy friendship with humans, helping to break down centuries of mistrust. "The Council has approved the deep space exploration mission," Grimjaw reported, joining her at the viewport. "Human technology and Catherian strength working together to map the galaxy's unknown regions. And to watch for more Devourers," Nora added. "Indeed, they will return eventually, but when they do, they will find not separate species fighting alone, but an alliance forged in battle and tempered by honor." As if summoned by their conversation, Zephyr bounded over, now towering above Nora, but still gentle enough to accept her scratches behind his ear ridges. He chirped something in Catherian that made Grimjaw laugh. "He says that saving his life was the moment that saved both our peoples," Grimjaw translated. "And he wonders if you have any more of those mechanical butterflies." Nora smiled, pulling a new toy from her pocket and activating it. As Zephyr bounded away in pursuit, she reflected on how a single act of compassion had transformed not just two species, but the entire galaxy. Sometimes the smallest gestures carried the greatest power, and sometimes the most unlikely friendships became the foundation for the greatest achievements. The stars stretched endlessly before them, full of promise and possibility, and for the first time in galactic history, humanity and the Catherians would explore them together.